and Instagram. Okay, Wellspring Coaching. All right, I sent you an invite. I'm muting my laptop. Wellspring Coaching. Hello, hello.
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 Welcome.
Can you guys
Can
hear
you
us?
guys hear us?
Can you
Can
hear
you
me?
hear me?
Can you
Can you hear me, Regina?
I can't.
I think I
I think I can hear you. Say something, Regina.
There's like an interesting feedback. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, cool. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
We're
Going live. Everyone who's
in the
joining
chat,
in
let
the
us know where you're listening in
chat,
from.
let us know where you're listening in
This
from.
will be just
And,
a little
this will be
interview.
just a little interview with Regina G, Integrative Wellness Coach. And we're just going to talk and flow, see what's going on in the collective today, and
about some
talk about some things that
on your
on
journey.
our journey, and
Decided
to check in with you
afterwards. We're here to answer any questions you might be floating in the consciousness. This is an open conversation. But first, I want to welcome Regina. And please tell us who you are, what you do, and we're just going to flow tonight. Thank you for everybody who's coming in.
Yeah, first, thank you for this space. I'm really excited about it. I got to see a friend in the Phoenix portal, and I was like, oh, I need to do that. So thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm Regina. I'm an integrative wellness coach, which means I'm the person who bridges the gap between wanting to be healthier and building the things that you need to make that happen. My practice is called Wellspring Coaching. So what I care about is like that deep source within us all and going spiraling in and into that wellspring and then bringing it out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you want to know?
Yeah, so what inspired you to start your own
journey?
like self-development, healing, and and then we'll talk about
why you start your journey.
Just kind of
Yeah, so I think my biggest like reason for starting Wellspring and doing what I am now, it comes from like my lived experience with depression after studying abroad in college. I went to India, northern India in Missouri. Yeah, and I loved it there. I got to be this like expanded self. I remember listening to the Life Soul podcast with Sumant Kid on Super Soul Conversations while I was like walking the mountain paths, and I was like, this is what it's about. And she was talking about how like you expand and you expand some more. So like the process of cocooning and metamorphosizing over and over throughout your life. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, look at this expansion. And then I didn't think about the fact that later there would be this like, oh yeah, you do have to contract to expand. So when I came back, it was this major contraction. And the best word I had for it was depression. And so I was like, okay, what do I do about this? So I went the medical route and I tried to fix it and nothing touched it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is definitely, there's some more spiritual components to this than I would have given it credit for. Give me, I think my headphones are like connected to something else. So give me like 2 seconds.
Okay, I hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so lived experience with depression, and then I was studying neuroscience and anthropology in university, and I was like, oh, this is a really interesting connection between these two like micro and macro worlds of like what it means to be human. So I started researching it in both of those spaces, and I thought I was going to get a PhD, and then COVID hits, and it's like, oh, just kidding, we're not doing that right now. What are we going to do instead? And that's when I found coaching.
And what is the coaching path for you, and how does it help on the healing journey? As you mentioned, treating your depression. I've suffered with depression myself. It was ironic. I was studying to be a doctor as well, and I was like, how can I help people heal in like depressive state of existence? And I looked for what is the holistic healing that can help me on my own path. And then I got fascinated into the alternative healing, whether it was yoga and meditation and mindfulness as a lifestyle medicine. So that's what took me on my path from Western medicine to just really the study of healing in general, of humans, and then taking that into my writing and my coaching. So I'm wondering, how did you land on coaching specifically? Because that seemed to be a kind of a topic. What is the value of having a coach in your life? And maybe did you experience having a coach?
I didn't experience having a coach before I became a coach, which is kind of interesting. But this question of like authority is like, who has the authority on healing? Like, who is the healer? Is my like kind of passion. And I love the way that coaching frames it, where it's like, you have everything you need. Like, you know yourself more than anyone else will ever know you. Like, you're the only person with access to that inner world. So what are you going to do with it? And I love how coaching is all about evoking that voice and that inner knowing rather than like outside in telling you what you should do or how you're supposed to do it.
No, that's perfectly said. And for me, it's like taking accountability for my health. You don't always like to do that. And say, okay, I've been making choices for a couple of years now, and starting to impact my health in some ways. And I have the ability to make a different choice. And it's hard. This is a society of self-denial, often numbing avoidance, and it's hard to take accountability. And receiving help on the journey is what's important. And whether that's going to see a doctor and having a coach, it both can be helpful for the path. So tell me more about what you offer in the practice. What have you found useful in terms of the lifestyle medicine, the sourcing, the empowerment, the healing, the taking the accountability? What is something that you often tell your clients?
So first I want to dwell a little bit with like, I feel like I'm a really good bridge between like the patient and the prescriber, like the provider and the patient. Like, I really care about humanizing healthcare. Like, I think a lot about what is dehumanizing healthcare versus humanizing and what it means to be a person who's sick, or like the anthropology of it. There's so much I could say, but I want to talk about like the context experts versus the content experts. Like, I love having like working with a doctor who's a content expert. Like, they know all of the things there is to know about a specific disease pathway, and that the problem there is not knowing who it's for or the person in front of you. Like, I love how we're being with the patient, and that kind of like, oh yeah, like the person is the most important part of this, and how do we do more of that? And that's where the coach comes in, and having that team, that care team. And kind of a tangent, but Parker Palmer talks about how we have to be like, we have to have solitude and community in order to like find our way in this great work. And so I love like applying those kind of spiritual truths. He's also the one of the biggest teachers I had to get me through my depression. Was he had this book called Hidden Wholeness. Yeah, and he talks about like, oh yeah, like you have to be able to like walk some of these paths. You can only walk yourself, and then you also need people to walk them with you. And so
what do you think that looks like community and healing as a cohort? How does that look? How do you implement that, and where can you find that in society? I know that I'm personally seeking to create spaces for healing. I call it the medicine gathering once a month, and I invite people to come in and do research, do wisdom, and just talk. And we find that someone telling their story of a lesson that they're learning right now is something that I need to hear as well. And we've never met each other, but we're coming in at this time for a reason, and we find this collective journey somehow, whether it was in the past, present, or future, and we heal together. It's really just becoming conscious of our life, that we get to talk out loud and recognize, oh, I'm not alone in my journey. I've also never been alone in struggling with what I'm struggling with right now. Someone else has as well. They've healed from it. They've overcome it. And that is a medicine in itself. To have faith, to have hope, I can overcome a health
a health
concern,
concern
or
or
get through a
get through a
difficult
difficult
time
time
in
in
my
my
life.
life,
And
and
human
human connection is so valuable.
And
It's
You can't always get that in a doctor's office.
right? Like Brene Brown, like connection is why we're here, right? And so it's this like, okay, if there's a time and a place for all of the things, and like we talk about human condition all the time, we're all going to get sick in various ways throughout our life. And the question of like, okay, what does this mean about my body? What does this mean about my mind? And what am I going to do about it? Like, I love that so what question. I'm like, oh, like, hey, I'm depressed. Maybe why am I depressed? Maybe I love looking at it like, oh, my values aren't aligned with how I'm living, and that's why I'm feeling this way. Not that it's my fault, but that I have a choice about what I do going forward.
My
Yeah,
values,
and so it's like,
My values are not in alignment with how I'm living.
yeah, and it's like, oh, this is an alarm bell trying to get me to look deeper at what I'm doing or not doing.
And sometimes we get
lost
lost
on the path.
We know our values, but
Mhm.
we get distracted,
Whether it's
societal thing or yeah, it's hard sometimes to live in integrity with what we believe in, and sometimes we need to explore and have lessons. So when we intentionally invite ourselves into this space that's meant to reflect and to look at and to hold in loving awareness, we're able to take leaps and bounds in our life. Yeah,
Right. And it's like I can know what my values are. Like mine are coherence and service, and I like have a problem with what that looks like right in this moment. Like this morning, my husband had to be like, Regina, like playing small is not what you're supposed to do right now. And I was like, at first I was like, is that what I'm doing? And so it was like, oh yeah, being in that relationship with somebody who can look at you and say, this is maybe an alignment, but what if it isn't? What if I can see something you can't right now? And I'm offering that to you to notice. Yeah.
It's hard to receive sometimes as well. Sometimes we're not ready to hear, where we need to grow in our lives. And it's kind of a gift too when someone can provide that space for you and say, "Hey, I love you, but there's something I've noticed that might be helpful for you to know and to receive that critical feedback in a loving way." And that's what a coach, if they're skilled and they know what they're doing, are able to provide. It's a gentle act of empowerment. Empowerment in a way that
doesn't force you to do things because
you're not a coach. We're taking time to invest in you, and that's what it's about. So someone mentioned about depression, and right now I'm in the north. I'm from Florida, and I'm noticing within myself, the seasonal effect of my mental health. So I'm wondering, Regina, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you suggest someone who's listening, and for me as well, how do you navigate that seasonal depression, whether it's winter time or the holidays?
I've been thinking about this as well. And for me, this lesson of like, what is the time scope keeps coming back. And I know when I'm depressed, it's like, oh, this is how it feels like this is going to be this way forever. And then when I'm able to kind of like step back and be like, oh, there's so much more time than I can even wrap my head around. Like I was hiking today and I was thinking about like humans are not good at comprehending time. Like even if it's just like we have the Chronos time and then the Kairos time, how you navigate that and like a flow state and presence and all of these. Like mindfulness is such a thing because of that question of presence, right? And so with depression, I try to remind myself of seasons. Like, oh, this is a season of winter. I'm supposed to, like I am nature too. Maybe now is a time for me to be in my winter, and I'm not always going to be in my winter. Like there is going to be spring and summer and fall, and it's just I don't get to decide how long those are, but I do get to companion that season when it's present with me. And that companionship looks a lot like gentleness and yeah, just awareness of like, oh, is this where I am? What does that mean? What do I have to do about it? Like, how do I change my schedule? How do I respect it?
Winter time, you go within and remember the gratitude of what I've experienced in
a year's time.
to reflect on the life
And to
journey.
reflect on the
I
life
like to
journey,
see how,
I like to see how, even if it didn't make sense to me,
I
at this point,
connected
I
back
connected
to
back to
something I've been working on for the years. There's a story unfolding. I like to find the stories that unfolding in this year and how it reflects the goal of where I'm trying to go. And that winter time for me is the calling in. You come to peace with the year, no matter how chaotic it was. So I find it to be very hermity. And right now I'm trying to write a book, and it goes against everyone calling in for gathering and celebration. It's the balance of both worlds. When we do that. So I think we were talking earlier about hermity, hermit mode, the call to isolation, because that's the natural state. I'm in a time zone. I want to be alone at the same time. I want to enjoy my family over the holidays. So what do you find helpful to balance that? The call for self-care, for isolation, and even trying to be with friends and family that maybe don't want to be present with, or maybe you have a difficult time navigating family relationships. How do you approach your energy?
Yeah, like my favorite definition of self-care is a Parker Palmer quote, and he says self-care is simply the good stewardship of our gifts and our limits. And I think so often we think about our gifts, but we don't think about the limit side of things. And so for me, it's a lot about learning how to be honest with myself, where it's oh, I can't do all of this. So one, recognizing what I am capable of and what I'm not capable of. And to be honest, I just came I'm on the tail end of a really hard family Thanksgiving, and I got home and I was whew, that took way more than I thought it would. And so that awareness of okay, this is the reality of my situation is drained. So how do I focus on recovery? And my husband's a personal trainer, and he talks a lot about the science of recovery. And so learning from him about oh yeah, your muscles physically fit what physical recovery looks like, and being able to apply that to mental and spiritual recovery, because our culture talks a lot about sleep, but we don't really talk about recovery in the same way, or if we do, it's associated with sobriety. And I think there's room there to maybe expand a definition.
Can we do that here? I want to hear about the restoration of those different bodies, the spiritual body, the physical body. What does that mean to you, and how does it look like?
Yeah, this is definitely a growing issue, and Megan could explain it physical recovery a lot better than I can, but it's bear with me. But what I understand is that when you're trying to increase your strength, you have to push your muscles to their limit, and so doing you increase your capacity over time. And so it's recovery is also connected to resilience. And resilience is from Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, space, and the space capacity to choose. So for me, resilience is about increasing that space to choose. So spiritual resiliency and recovery looks like being able to handle greater and greater things, and you do that very incrementally. So you don't go into the gym if you've never gone to the gym and flip the 100-pound tire. That's just not what you do. You start with the little free weights, or you start with just body weight. And so it's similar with mental and spiritual capacity as well. And I'm also really intrigued by this idea of what I think adulthood and maturing is about learning how to take really good care of yourself. And so as I look at it as a coming of age, it's the more I know myself and the deeper I can take care of myself, the more of age and myself I am. So I don't know if that, I don't know if you were able to follow all that, because I don't know if that was coherent, but that's kind of where I'm at with all those things.
Right. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that contracting. What would you say to someone who's listening who might be in that phase of life, the cocooning phase, the things don't make sense right now, so I'm going within, maybe I'm struggling through some heavy energies I'm seeking to release, or just healing deep healing space. I don't know if you've been in that space. I think you've talked about it before. I certainly have, and I feel like I'm just now coming out and branching and making sense of the time period of my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think like it's the in breath and the out breath, and they both need each other. And when you're able to like be in that like fetal position, that raw, dense place, and you're able to be there without armoring up. So like it's once you add the armor that you get stuck there. And so if you're able to be there in that like soft tender, like, okay, this is where I am and I won't always be here, that's when it like it's like a spring. When you push the spring down, if you can be here, then when you let go, it can spring forth. But if you like squish it down and then lock it, it's never gonna spring back out. So being able to be small and vulnerable and in pain without having to armor up or protect yourself.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I spent some time and years in just deep isolation, and I recognized it was a gift. Even if I was fighting and struggling at the universe, just why do I have to be in this place in my life? And I recognized I'm not gonna let go. Because my higher self is trying to put me in this learning for my higher good, but I can't see. Yeah, I don't understand it as a gift. I didn't recognize it as a gift of being alone in solitude, learn who I am, and compassion to my story, my past, really set a strong vision of the future. Because this time in my life, it is a vulnerable spot. Being in my 20s, the world of possibilities are endless for me. There's so many different paths we can take at any point in life. Honestly, it doesn't matter how old you are. So to go within and to have that precious raw time with self. I cry so many tears in that space. Yeah, there's no one around me. I got to sit with my soul. It's uncomfortable.
Sorry, I'm on Do Not Disturb, but my dad was calling me, so I'm back. Will you say what you just said again?
Oh, it's the rawness of your soul, and that's a space that winter provides. I'm from Florida, so we don't really have much winter. So I feel now that I'm more north at this moment, it's calling me to go deeper than I have before, and find pleasure and joy in different avenues of myself. So even being in new environments, places that make me uncomfortable, multi-dimensional. Winter is still a time of deep expansion and joy that don't always live outside of itself. It's within. It's a heart space. And then it's such a raw time too, because when you're going through the holidays in December, at least for many of us who share the holidays, we're thinking people lost. Things we missed in our life. It's so reminiscent and raw and emotional. Money comes up. I want to give everyone in my family, but maybe I didn't meet my business goals. Maybe I had nothing to give but presents. Maybe I don't even have that. So it's things we don't talk about. We were expected sometimes to come in with a smile on your face, the holidays, to the Christmas parties, without acknowledging at all that within we're home, we're in our secret space. There's so much we're moving, so much we're feeling. So I don't know.
Yeah, I had a friend who sent me some of her writing this week, and she was talking about like being able to feel the deep drips of the world. It's like when you think about a cave and the things that form over time, and those like in the dark water droplets that are making Earth. And it feels like the solitude and that rawness is the place where you're able to hear those like incremental changes. And then if we aren't able to be in that rawness, like we won't be able to hear it. And so solitude to hear and be with the rawness. And then like this dynamic contradiction of like the deep solitude that is winter and the darkness and the sun being away. And then like the holiday season of like gathering and being with people, particularly with people who like know how to push your buttons in a certain way, and like what kind of personal growth that requires.
And someone asked a question, and we're opening the room for questions as well, or for you guys to share your thoughts. How do you both help clients battle reality versus dreams versus delusion?
This is a fun question. I like how you have 3 different sections.
Yes. I want to dive into what is reality versus dream versus delusion, because they can all be more into each other and mixed, and there's truth in a lie in this process of what we're moving through. So I don't know. What is the difference between reality versus dream?
For me, there's a time scale of it where it's like we normally talk about dreams as something in the future. It's rare. You can't talk about it in the present, where it's like, oh, I have achieved my dream. I'm living the dream. But in general, people who are coming to coaching are kind of like looking on the horizon, like that's where I want to get, and here's where I am, like reality versus dream. And I love to like connect the two. I'm like, okay, like what are you doing now that is already in this dream space, or like what about you as a person is going to help you to live, like close the gap. I'm all about minding the gap. And then the question of delusion, I'm not sure where to weave that one in, but I want to hear what you have to say about reality and dreams.
Dreams, I believe all dreams can become reality, and it's really about do you want it to manifest from an idea to manifestation, the real world. That's a choice. And sometimes the dreams you find out later is not really what we want. It's not really in alignment with our soul. It's not really in alignment with our true being and what we want out of life, but we don't know until we try. So all dreams, I think, are a pathway to a higher reality, or maybe a lower. It's when we are in denial and lying to ourselves that once it was a dream and now it's a reality and I still love it, but it's not really in alignment with my soul, then it becomes delusion. And then it becomes a manifestation of other things. If I lied to myself enough and I'm walking this path that on the surface, maybe it was once the highest dream reality. I really don't know. And yet maybe I'm not sacrificing my health to get there, or I'm sacrificing relationships to get there. Some type of sacrifice to get there. There's some type of sacrifice. When sacrifice, to me, that's not a loving vibration. It's not unconditional. Condition for you to have this state, freedom of this dream, I have to pay a cost. And that's when I think it becomes silly, because then are you living in a higher consciousness that you were praying for? But we don't know until we start walking it. But when we're able to look at it and feel and remember, what are my values? Why did I want to pursue this dream in the first place? And when I can think back into that place of that inner knowing, what God wants for me, and say yes to that, then the reality can shift and I can pivot and point in a higher direction. But dreams are always pushing us into some reality. Dreams are important. I think we should always be dreaming. I think the clients who come to me and say, oh, it's just a dream or it's fantasy, I'm like, no, you should be able to ask for more. You should be able to dream bigger. And that's the point. We're supposed to grow and evolve and learn. And that's not fair. It's when you lie to yourself.
Yeah, it's
to me that is and we all lying to ourselves about something. No one is perfect.
Yeah, it's the question of like, what are you being honest to? Like, are you honest to your small self or your big self? Are you honest to your relationship? Are you honest to your commitments? I have one of my offerings in Wellspring it's called Envision, and it's 10 weeks to articulate the vision for the future you want to live. And it's all about the dreaming before the doing. So asking the big living questions in order to like be honest to that biggest version of yourself and that big dream.
And what is an example of the question? It's not, besides just asking, okay, what is my dream? What is my dream reality? What is the life I'd like to live? what is something that we find people often are afraid to admit?
Well, the beginnings of like Carolyn Elliott talks about having is evidence of wanting. So where you're at right now, there's some part of you that wanted what you have. So it's really hard to admit the like, oh, I really like being poor because this or that. Like, oh, I really like being kind of sick because I get attention. Like whatever that might look like, it's hard to admit the like just because humans don't like good things because they're good and dislike bad things because they're bad. It's so much more complex than that. And so it's hard to admit the bad things that you like, especially in like community.
Okay, someone said delusional thinking that I'm their soulmate. So we can talk about relationships and love. Definitely,
I got it.
I believe that when you
find someone that
really
says hope and belief,
or someone that that you come across and someone that's really perfect for you, but it still doesn't work. Whether you don't know them in real life, or maybe you do know them in real life and you're trying to date that person. It's still always pointing us to the direction of ourselves and learning about ourselves. And I believe that whenever you perceive someone
in a romantic way or attraction, there's something about you
that you're
that
finding
that person that's reflecting back
Pointing
in
you in
a direction.
also maybe to your soulmate. And to take each person along the way as someone who is pointing us in the right direction. So they're teachers, even if something in my heart and happens to me so many times, to still have
forgiveness and compassion for myself,
wanting to chase that person. Me thinking I'm so in love with someone who's not in love with me, or doesn't acknowledge at all. And when that relationship when that whole situation, that person is trying to inspire me to be whole, and it's none of it is conscious. It's all completely, happening in a subconscious level. Dating journey.
Right. So relationships are this like incredible growing space. So like when you're like, you can do certain things in solitude, like we were talking about earlier, where it's like, oh yes, like here's what integrity looks like in the me space. But then when you enter the we space, it's like, whoa, like this is another dimension. And so one of the things that's really unique about me is I've been with my partner for almost 9 years now, and I'm only 25. So I have like been in this super long-term relationship as I've like become an adult. And it's been my greatest growing edge. And then it's just, yeah, having somebody grow up with you is a very unique experience.
Well, they say, you're supposed to be in love with someone's soul. So if you're really in love with someone's soul, that it doesn't matter how much you change and evolve, the essence of that person is still never changing. So what would you say to someone listening, they're in a relationship or having relationship problems? How do you spend 9 years probably having to forgive so many times, probably having to witness so much change in your partner? So what is the cohesion?
Yeah, the cohesion is getting to love, like learning together. Like it's not being like Buddhism talks about like attachment and like non-attachment. And I think in a relationship, like somewhat like you can apply this to parenting too. Like me as a person, I don't get to control. I don't get to hold too tightly to anybody else. Same in coaching. Like I'm not here to hold tightly to like what I think we should be or who I think we should be. I'm here to just like I'm not here to control you. I'm here to cherish you. And like in my interpersonal relationship, I'm also one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is how I was able to mend my relationship with one of my sisters after we had a really big falling out. So like, yeah, the relationship of like learning what is care and how to give care in a way that's not controlling or dominating, but it's rather about cherishing and supporting and like stewardship. And that's also applicable to what I was saying earlier about like doctors and patients. It's like, how do we witness a person who is having questions like big health questions and not dehumanize them. And it's, oh, we don't try to control and label them. We try to cherish them and love them.
Control has been a topic for me in my healing journey, in my relationships. Redefining what it means to unconditionally love.
Yeah.
Now, as I grow older and
into
into what is consciousness,
what is consciousness,
what
of what society has taught us
through movies or
or
typical social conditioning, it teaches you that there's some type of love that is controlled, that is put in a box, and that's security, and that's love, and I'm finding that in it. And so when I think that love is supposed to go a certain way or be a certain thing, and that's in conflict
with what
I have defined as love, it's hard for me to expand and to allow relationships to breathe. And when people need to leave my life, and allow them to have their journey and to be that open heart space, to be vulnerable, it's difficult. So what do you suggest? How do people bring awareness to control and allow vulnerability? That's what I believe is the medicine part of control. Vulnerability
it's hard.
Right. You think about like what it means to be powerful. And there's the way of being powerful that is like extractive and top down and like I am going to control. And then there's the way of being powerful of like, I know I cannot control this, and so I'm going to get really good at navigating uncertainty and like holding that, like developing my ability to tolerate unknowns within my own system so that I can go through this world. And like, it's not about developing the skill to control, it's about developing the skill to navigate. And like that requires so much vulnerability, like being able to say you don't know.
So anyone is listening, you guys have a question to wrap up tonight, please leave so in the chat. And I'll give it a few minutes for you guys to type your questions. But yeah, we're open book right now. I would like to know what you guys are moving through at this time. So let us know in the chat if you have any questions for us to discuss. Welcome you. And thank you for coming in right now.
I liked hearing what you were talking about being so far north for the first time and learning what winter is in this latitude versus what you grew up with.
Yeah, it is different. I'm learning to have joy internally, and I'm moving through some things that I can't go out into the open yet with. There's things that I'm building heavily and growing extremely that I'm not called to share yet. It's a private growth. It's a sacred time. It's going to be a seed that I'm protecting, I'm nourishing, I'm planting right now. I'm like a squirrel. Before fall, it takes a seed that I relate right now. I have many sacred things in my life that I'm keeping private. And I'm excited to reveal them. I'm excited to express them. I'm excited to grow with them. And yeah, I feel like the darkness, the cold, I feel it right now. I look, I dive into it. There's so much growth waiting for me. So I'm allowing myself time to go within and to go silent. Secure for a moment. Not sharing anything. And just being. Yeah, it's sewing. Okay, that's it. Is there something you all have changed your mind about specifically in your dreams and coaches?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, I need a second to think about an example.
That is a really
Really
good
good
question.
question.
It's something really
Really
big.
big.
Oh, I know
Oh,
it's
I
right
know it's right there.
there.
I'll say
for me,
for me, I've given
no.
up.
I've given
I've
up
given up
a
a
lot
lot of ideas
of what I
of what I
think
think
reciprocity
reciprocity
is.
is.
For me,
For
my
me,
biggest
my
prayer in
biggest
the
prayer in the past few
is how do I receive
receive love, joy, peace. And I
I
just started
generating.
generating.
I just started giving, even if I had absolutely nothing in my life, nothing in my wallet to give. I'm not down to my last few coins in this wallet. I'm down to this trickle of love
Love I have to give because it hurts so much. I have worked my ass off too much.
Yet
I reached the threshold of just give a little more. And
I
I found that when I allow that fear to finally fade and I give,
that love is returning.
That love is returning to me.
How
It's never how I believe. It's never how I think.
It's been a
deep surrender.
absolute
An absolute deep surrender this year for me.
I've given up
so
so
many
many things. And
it's always like the universe is asking for more.
And when I surrendered, it was
delusion. It was
what I think is keeping me afloat. What I think is growing
me and
prospering me, sinking me. It was drowning me. And the reason why I was allowing it was because I was told that's the way. That's the way to have love
and prosperity.
And when I finally allowed and I unchained myself at the key and I allowed myself to be set free, and I wanted to love, just love. I wanted to be myself. I wanted to grow business.
Just grow damn business.
Yeah, I have a note on one of my little boards that says surrender and let it flood. Like I like hold on so tightly that I'm like, oh no, like I can't handle it, or like, oh nah. And I'm like, no, like just let it flood. Like you can't hold the floodgates back. Like just let it, just surrender.
I love that you say that because I've kept having these dreams throughout the year where I'm always running from the tsunami. And you know how when we're in our season of lack, things are lacking something. So I think about how it's the ocean, the tsunami, and the water completely leaves you. The beach is empty. And for a moment, you're like,
damn, there's no water.
There's a tidal wave coming in your life. Literally, what the way is
for surrender. Every single time it's
for a moment, for a season. I'm not going to say yet. It's going to be big, and beautiful, and it's destined.
Yeah, and then the difference between like passive surrender and active surrender. Like catching yourself in the internal brace where you're like, oh, yeah, I'm holding. Being like, versus the like, just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like I'll surrender, it'll be fine. Yeah, like making a practice of it for me has been really important.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question.
Can I answer it?
Oh, man, there's ways to answer that question. Someone asked, how do you deal with spiritual attacks?
Can I answer the other question before we go into the spiritual attacks?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I just wanted. So I think I knew this, and then I forgot it when I got older, and then coaching has re-taught it to me. But when I was a little girl, my mom was like trying. I was having these problems, and she kept trying to fix it. She kept trying to fix it. And at one point, I was like, "Mom, I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen."
Ooh.
And so, like, what my mind has changed most of that with coaching is what it means to actually help another person. And so, what I know now is like the advice giving, the fix it mode isn't normally the most helpful thing, especially if it's unsolicited. Like if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I need specific advice about this," then that's really helpful. But the even greater gift you can give somebody is just that like deep reflective listening and say, "Oh, I see you, I hear you, and I value you, and I'm not trying to fix you." That's what being a coach has really taught me.
Super important.
Okay, now I'm ready for spiritual attacks.
No, not ready for
ready
future
for
tax,
but
no,
I'm joking.
Well, let's
Let's define what spiritual texts are in case someone's
I
listening
don't know what that
and
is.
doesn't know what that
So
is.
wondering
So
how you
wondering how you define that.
Spiritual texts. For me, like I don't have a lot of experience with like intentional spiritual attacks. Like I've never like, but I feel like unintentional spiritual attacks happen all the time, and it's when people's energy kind of comes out sideways and like catches you or whoever. And so it's a boundaries question. It's like, okay, like I'm gonna do what I can where I am with what I have. And for me, it's like right now, I don't know if you guys are Lord of the Rings fans, but if you are, there's like these huge like king statues that have their hands out like this. And I like call these guys in. I'm like, okay, guys, I need you to like stand here and protect me from all of this stuff that is not mine. And so yeah, it's another form of asking for help, and it's opening up to like I do not know all of the help that is out there for me to receive, but I'm gonna ask because why, it's better to ask and have it than not have it.
For me, spiritual attacks, I don't know whether it's like someone cursing you, sending you bad energy, witchcraft,
whatever.
personally, don't believe those things can touch me if I have surrendered my heart and I'm in alignment with Most High. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I believe in angels. I believe in so many ancestors that are asking me to love
and loving protection at all times, all moments. I'm always thanking them.
I'm always thanking my spiritual team for
protection.
And I trust that they lead to me and they always shut up
for me.
my students of my life. And I know that if I'm not consciously aware, maybe someone trying to send me bad energy, I know that I'm protected. If it comes to the point where in my awareness, sometimes I'll receive an intuitive message that someone is sending that negative energy towards me, or sometimes, I'll just get a gut feeling. Having negative feelings towards you. I believe that if it's in my awareness, it's only in my awareness for the reason. It's not, can't affect me, it can't touch me. What I'm looking at is looking at me, and there's something there for me to learn from and to explore a higher purpose, higher reason. But no one has control over me. No one has the ability to harm me. Unless I allow it, or my soul has chosen it. So then I come out with a sense of empowerment, a sense of healing. Because I am divinely guided and protected. That is my mantra every day. So you can give those things, you can give those energies, those people power to control you, but at the end of the day, nobody has power over you. I hope that answered the question.
I want to add, like, I think it goes back to the spiritual recovery question of like, okay, like what does spiritual wellness look like? And once it's in your awareness, what you do with it. And then I also love the opportunity to figure out what works for you and your body, your energetic body, your physical body, all your bodies specifically. So it's like, I know certain people have certain ways of like clearing their space or protecting it. And it's so cool to see everybody's like personality with it.
And I am reading the person who's in the chat. Thank you for sharing. I've been in spaces, I've lived in the past, I have been living in places along the trail years. I have been on old medications, there's heavy dark energy spaces I've walked in. It's almost tangible. You can feel dark energy in places. Obviously, there's a memory to it. And I believe that if you're feeling those energies, if you're walking to that space, if you feel like it's impacting your life, those are spaces that are calling for love. And the key is to turn that fear into love. Face the fear. calling in for you to help. But if you're experiencing
that fear,
it almost feels like it can control you. I promise it doesn't. I promise it's an avenue for deep healing, but it's calling to you. And you have the power to take that love back. To pour love somewhere that is needed, whether it's yourself or environment, or home, another person. It's a calling. It's a call. It's a ask for help. And for some reason, it's in your awareness that you have the ability and the power to give that and create that love. So I hope that helps.
If you have the ability to sense it, you also probably have the ability to do something about it.
Totally. That's why I said if it's in your awareness, it's there for a reason. It's not meant to. Okay. Locate Logan asked, when was the last time you took a day for yourself, and how did you recharge to continue on your mission?
I actually did this last week because I was like, okay, it's not serving the highest purpose right now for me to do this in the drained state I am. And so I like to go back to like, what did my child self love doing? And my most favorite thing was like laying under the apple tree and just reading. So I've just been diving into fantasy books right now and just like letting that be its own little world. And then also trying to like go on a walk. And I love like getting to cook, like use my hands to cook something like a good nourishing meal.
For me, it's trying to wake up and allow myself freedom of mind. In a way, responsible, but wake up and not answer an email, not do anything I feel like I have to do something that makes me feel good to do. And the option looks like taking time a slow morning to cook a very long meal for myself, and then going into nature, meditating, singing. If I go too long without being able to sing or to dance or to stretch, do yoga, then I start to lose my mind a little bit. But as a highly ambitious person, the opportunity is always always expensive forever. But I always say this, and I say this often, in that the expansion doesn't always look like doing. When you allow the same amount of space to go within, equally equivalent to the amount of space that you're creating, you're allowing the inspiration and the stillness that you need to recharge and rest that brain. Because it's a muscle. It needs to be strengthened. We're going to be able to go back into a more focused than before. It's ironic because I want to think my way a problem. I want to think my way or use my hands to create my way illusions of fear and entrapment. And when you just stop, just don't do anything. It's so ironic that you finally have the breakthrough. So I have to remind myself that.
Yeah, it's the wisdom of the counterintuitive. It's like, oh, I want to like do my way out of this, but it's like, nah, you gotta just be your way out of this. Like,
yeah, it's a deep fear. At least in American society as well. The more I do things, the more I'm going to accomplish, the more I'm going to win, the more I'm going to succeed. And then you see people meditating or reading a book, but it's still allowing them on their path. It's still creating an elevation. Internal work is just as valid and important as the external. And that has opened the door for me as a professional person. I don't always have to be working so hard to do really excellent things. Sometimes it just makes one excellent choice. But I wouldn't have known what choice that was unless I meditated.
Yeah, so that space of like, okay, if you don't have the spaciousness from the being, then there is no real doing.
Right. I think I can take one more question. Listening. I've been on here. for the past hour, and I thank you for listening, and whoever listens later. And thank you, Regina, for being here tonight. So late in the winter time with Christmas around the corner. So these conversations are super relaxed. I like to go back and listen. There are little times that you saying that is new for me to hear. And I hope whoever's listening receives from this. Sometimes the questions are really random.
I love the question.
So I hope we get at least one more tonight before we say.
I love what the chat just said about source requires a lot less work from us than society tells us is needed. And like Wellspring, I named my business Wellspring Coaching because of a quote from Cynthia Bourgeois, where she says, "The journey to the wellspring of hope is really a journey to the innermost ground of our being, where we meet and are met by God." And like I use the word source to talk about God all the time. So this idea of like, okay, how do we live in a way that's connected to source? And like, what does that say about health and wellness? So thank you for sharing.
Can you share that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. The journey to the wellspring of hope is really a journey to the innermost ground of our being, where we meet and are met by God.
That's that shadow work. That soul work. And it's a hard place to go in. It is, because that you have to look at all the things that are holding yourself back, all the ways that we have chosen to limit ourselves, make ourselves small, the ways we have abandoned ourselves because of fear. And to go into that space and to pull ourselves out. It's a path, and it's not an easy one.
Yeah, and like the question of like, what does it mean to live a life that is connected to source?
What does that mean to you?
I think it's like I think about human beings as like being channels of energy. So it's like for me, living a life connected to source is about staying connected to that source of energy. So like being enlivened, being vital, being alive, and then also that like it's not just about right living, it's also about true living, and then eventually like truth itself. So it's like my life is my art. How I live is ultimately like the best. Like I have opinions, I have thoughts, but how I live should speak for itself. So yeah, those are my first impressions.
I'll say for me, very much the same. For me, what's speaking out to me is when I'm truly in spirit, it looks like freedom. It looks like peace. And it's not always what I thought.
It's hardly ever.
It never is, right? But I noticed when I finally get into that place, I can breathe. I can be myself. There's growth happening. I'm able to break free from inauthenticity, from what I think I have to do, what I think I have to be, and I can finally just be. And that's like so simple. I know we say that all the time, but it's just me. But it's a lightweight feeling. It's a floating.
Yeah, and it's not just a nothingness. Like it's still this like it's not boring. It's exciting and like juicy, and you want to like sink your teeth into it and be challenged in the ways that feel good.
I like that. You talk about spiritual fruit. When you're in alignment with the Holy Spirit, there's fruit. To me, I would say this: heaven on earth is sitting on the beach eating a makeup. It's that feeling of being so nourished and taken care of in this moment. I can't ask for anything. It's just I'm content. I am at peace, even if everything around me isn't perfect, and it's never going to be. That's not what gave me peace to begin with. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't achieving anything. It was a vibration within me that I finally allowed myself space to receive and allow greater love.
being able to celebrate how good that mango tastes on the beach, like that. Like,
Gratitude for life, and if I can tap into gratitude for life right here and now, then I'm living my highest reality.
The highest timeline here and now.
In the next
The
moment,
next moment
is what the door is opening
door is
to.
opening to.
But I can't be
But I
focused
can't
on what's behind the door. I can't be focused on where the door is, how
it is how
can I open
I open it. Just
it?
be.
And the door naturally just
Naturally just
opens.
so cheers to letting the doors open on their own.
Cheers! And you know,
the door
hopefully
is
it's
open
open
in
2024.
2024.
And I desire for myself to walk through it with ease and certainty and alignment, and just keep allowing
love.
and it's so simple. I don't want to even put like goals, like no goals.
Just
Be there at the now and stay in that vibration. See where it takes.
I like that take on a goal. Like, oh yes, my goal is to be.
All right, y'all.
So when asking questions.
Oh, someone said freedom. In this state, I don't have
energy, no stress,
only feeling full of love, being lost in
lost
love. Right. So thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here, Regina. Thank you for sharing your thoughts tonight, your wisdom, and just being at service in the world right now, holding space for others, walking through the journey, sharing your tools, sharing your knowledge, and it's important work. And I value you, and I look forward to growing together and to keep creating spaces and just empowering one another, holding each other accountable to keep rising. And higher light and loving awareness. That's the mission.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
good night, everybody. I'll talk to you soon, Regina, and
everyone else here.
please stay tuned and please give Regina a follow. Reach out to us.
See how we can support your path.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.